Welcome to the Pzaz Filmmaker interview series. At Pzaz, we've made it our mission to help film and video makers succeed. In this series, we'll be speaking to interesting people from across the film industry. We'll gain insight into their journeys to help share their lessons with our audience.
Today's interview is with Henrik Bjerregaard Clausen. Henrik is a film and commercial director who hails from Denmark, where he started his career as a visual effects artist working in advertising. In 2008, Henrik directed his first short film, ETA, which went on to win several awards. Since then, Henrik has directed promos, trailers, short films and breakers, and his work has won multiple awards in Europe, Canada and the United States. Please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Henrik Bjerregaard Clausen. Henrik, welcome to the Pzaz video interview series, and thank you very much for joining us today. We're really grateful for you spending the time. So maybe for people that aren't familiar with you or with your work, would you mind starting by just explaining a little bit about what it is you do and your main sort of background, if that's all right?
Sure. I'm a filmmaker. I live in Denmark and have a background in animation and visual effects. And that's still primarily how I make a living day to day. And then I have a major interest in narrative fiction, particularly science fiction, which I like that playground, both in terms of the visuals you can create in that playground and also the themes and ideas that you can explore. So I work in both animation and live action. In my fiction work, I've tried to focus on live action primarily, and I think the reason for that is in order to make a living doing fiction work, I think it's more tenable if you do it in live action instead of animation. At least that's been my experience as being someone who tends to do a lot of the work himself on the film. I tend to wear a lot of hats in the work that I do, and that's given me, a lot of opportunities in terms of doing the kind of work that I want to do. Like science fiction, for instance, it ain't cheap. If you want to delve into the world building, which is the part that I really love in filmmaking and in science fiction in particular. But it just takes a lot of work, and it's nice if you're sort of able to do a lot of the work yourself. But then your main limit or your main enemy is time. Because you could work on one project forever and not have it completed.
I think I heard in a previous interview that one of your short film entries ended up taking 8 years in the end when you'd finished eventually working on it. Was that right?
It was 8 years.
Wow.
So, yeah. And the film was 8 minutes long. So
right.
that's not a nice sort of average 1 minute a year. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I mean, obviously I didn't work on that full time. It was sort of like in sandwiched in between, paying gigs and whatever happens in life. But in the end, it was still a short film.
I think it speaks maybe to your commitment though, and to the desire to really, like you said, to realize that world, to build a world and really fully inhabit it.
Yeah, and maybe we can get into that later, but I think in terms of, I wouldn't recommend anyone spending 8 years on a short film because you really have to be mindful of what is the goal you have in mind for the film. I mean, making a nice film, that's great, and you learn a ton doing it, but in the end, I mean, is it gonna get you farther on in your career as a showpiece or a springboard to do a feature film based on a short film, or is it just that neat little package? And then you learn a ton and you can put it on the festival circuit, and that's all cool and fine. But in the end, what does it really give you?
Could we maybe speak about goals just for a minute? Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I think one thing I'm really interested in, and I think others would be too, is as a filmmaker, how do you define goals for a project? Because I think, like you say, it might be easy. I guess it might be easy just to go into something and say, I want to create something cool, but obviously you have to work in a commercial environment and you have to manage your time and your resources. So yeah, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, goals in filmmaking for me, that has changed quite a lot over time. When I started out, when I was in my, let's say, mid 20s, whatever it was, then the goal was just sort of to make something cool. I mean, something that I thought was interesting to work on, and hopefully fun or engaging to see.
Mm,
And specifically something that I would find difficult. Like I would have to force myself to overcome a lot of obstacles.
a challenge. Yeah.
Exactly. I definitely love the challenge part, and I still do. But initially, that was a big part of it, and just sort of overcoming that challenge and then completing the project.
Mm,
So that was a big part of it. And back then, when I started, I didn't have specific, or at least not very thought through commercial goals in terms of once this film is completed, then what's going to happen?
yeah.
I mean,
What does success look like for this
exactly.
project?
Case in point, one of the first, there was an animated short film that I did with a couple of friends. We completed that back in 2008. And we spent 3 to 4 years on that. So you see, I have a bit of a theme for me, spending years on years doing this stuff. But anyway, that's the first sort of major project we completed.
Sure.
And then once it came out, then YouTube was a fairly new thing back then. I mean, initially, our idea was just that we're gonna compete in this sort of niche computer animation competition at a very niche computer art festival in Germany.
Right.
It's within something called the demo scene, which was a big thing in Europe, especially in the 90s, when I grew up doing computer art, even, either animation, graphics, programming, music, that sort of thing. Then you sort of met up and then you competed in different sort of genres or divisions, if you will. Right. I mean, who's the best programmer? Who's the best graphic artist? Whatever. Anyway, that was sort of the venue we were aiming for. And then on top of that, we had in mind, like, sure, we're gonna try and sell it to film festivals. I didn't really have that big a grasp on film festivals at that point, but that was sort of the main goal. But then YouTube had become a thing, and then I believe first someone uploaded it, which was a thing you just sort of did back then.
Sure, yeah.
Some people still do. But anyway, and then I uploaded it myself as well. And then it actually got on the front page on YouTube, back when YouTube had a front page.
Yeah.
When it wasn't like, compartmentalized to
everyone's personalized feed. Yeah.
Exactly. Back in 2008. And then it got like, I think it was 120 or 200,000 views within a quite short time span. And for us, and back then, that was huge. I mean, then we sort of felt like we really reached an audience. And then, you could say like, views equals popularity, that sort of thing. But it definitely felt good to sort of feel like you had a reach, and people like your work, basically.
Of course, yeah. Did it then have an impact on afterwards how you viewed success, how you sort of measured, the goals of a project or the success of a project?
It definitely did in part, because then that sort of, in a way, at least partially became like, if you get a lot of views, that means that it's popular / good. It's definitely something you wanted to attain. But at the same time, I mean, I think I've always been mindful of this, but even more so as I age. But obviously, popularity doesn't equal quality.
Mm-hmm.
Or revenue
necessarily.
Sure. especially on the internet. But anyway, I mean, I've always had the one of the driving points for me has always been the challenge to myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to do something that feels easy. And that also, I think that's probably sometimes to my detriment, because you don't have to spend 4 years or 8 years or whatever doing a specific project. I mean, if you really love the process, then that's fine. But I don't necessarily definitely not for 4+ years. And then going back to the track of goals.
Yeah.
Because back then that was sort of like, I mean, that felt like a success, to me. I mean, we got it out, and we entered that competition I mentioned in Germany.
Yep.
And we won the main prize there. So that was nice. That was sort of like a vindication of, worth it, sort of. But it wasn't like, here's a huge cash prize. I mean, it was much more like you're among your peers, and you got voted to be in the top.
Recognition.
Exactly. So that was sort of the main thing. And then afterwards, it was sort of like cherry on the cake that we got the sort of YouTube recognition. And I'll say that 200,000 views back then, it was more than 200,000 views is now.
Of course.
If you it's sort of like inflation, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But anyway, back then that was sort of like goals achieved all the way around. But then after that, then it sort of felt like, I mean, we gotta do more stuff like this. But that film was 4 minutes and it took 4 years to make. So that doesn't quite add up. And if you wanna do commercial work in fiction, then it either needs to be a feature film or a TV series. And TV series, that wasn't really, at least on my radar back then. My sort of main dream at that point started to become, because it wasn't yet, but started to become more aligned with, I want to do the Hollywood thing.
Yes.
Like I want to be a director and I want to do feature films. And I always, I grew up with, Alien, Terminator, The Abyss, Ridley Scott, James Cameron, David Fincher. Those are sort of my heroes in terms of the aesthetic that I wanted to achieve in filmmaking.
And it's funny because I'm not surprised at all to hear that, because when I watch some of your trailers and shorts, like Invasion, for example, was really sort of was memorable to me. You see some of those influences in that work, sort of those directors, because of the scope of their vision, and they imagined these worlds, whether it was sort of James Cameron, in Aliens, or sort of Ridley Scott with like Blade Runner. They imagined these big canvases to paint on, and I see, when I watch your trailers, I get the sense that you have that same desire to sort of to go big and to show something at scale, which I think you've done amazingly well. And when I watched those trailers, I was really blown away. Like, I think they're fantastic. So I think
thank you. I appreciate that.
You've achieved something really amazing. When you you've had the success from sort of getting onto YouTube's front page, and then fast forward quite a while, obviously, to now. It seems like you've cultivated a life where you can, on the one hand, take on these challenges, but at the same time you can make a living from sort of from being a visual effects director, from being a filmmaker. So how do you balance that now between pursuing things that you want to pursue versus taking on projects that are more commercial, that pay the bills almost?
Yeah, I mean right now, and for the past few years, I became a dad around 2 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I have that little one now, and that that's had a huge impact on my life in many ways.
It will do. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got a 6-year-old son, so I
there
know where
you
you're
go.
coming from. Yeah. Changes everything.
So I'd say that I'm probably still a bit in the nitty-gritty of that. But it does get easier. I mean, I should say to people who don't have kids, and I mean, obviously, it takes a lot of time and energy. So that's the whole thing. But just in broad strokes, I started as a freelancer in 2008. Yeah, actually, the same year we released that short film I mentioned before.
Right. Yeah.
It's called ETA. If someone wants to check it out.
Yeah. And it's on your website with your other work, isn't it? If people want to go and look. Yeah.
But anyway, I started as a freelancer there, and then since then I've just been this one-man band, gone for hire, doing primarily work for small, medium, big bureaus who deliver stuff to anything from Lego to mask, whatever. Doing sort of like corporate / commercial animation, explainers, animated graphics, what have you, and then sometimes TV adverts, and a little bit of visual effects for typically short films. The sort of like a local, both a film school where I live, but also just sort of like a community, of up and coming filmmakers.
Yeah.
And then I'll do some, underpaid work for them to help them out. Sometimes doing visual effects, but what really pays the bills is the commercial gigs for corporate or adverts. And then next to that, I've been really fortunate. I mentioned that in the other interview as well, but I'll just briefly mention that I've had a really good, a great collaboration with a school here where I live in Denmark called 3D College, and they've been gracious. I'll just put in some more light here. They've been very gracious in their collaboration with me, where I've pitched ideas and projects to them, and then I've collaborated with the school and then the student body to create, for instance, Invasion, the short film you mentioned before. And we've done 5 projects in total, where they've funded the bill for sort of, well, we got to build some stuff, we got to get some materials, and then they've paid me to do the work. And then I've been lucky enough to, gather collaborators who've been willing to work for free on next to nothing and help me build these worlds. So we've done 5 of those in total. And that's been sort of, in my career, I'd say that's sort of been the best mix probably I've been able to achieve thus far in terms of creative freedom. And there's also there's sort of like a budget. I mean, I do get paid, not for all my time, but I do get paid, and I get to do something I think is really, really cool and really challenging for me. And then I do get help doing that. Having said that, I do work with students, so there's sort of you sort of have to work within that environment. You can't just say, hey, I want this and that, and then it just get delivered. It doesn't just get delivered 7 days later. You have to go in and work with them and sort of nurture it.
I think working with students must be an interesting departure from working with a traditional crew, because you are mentoring and you're guiding people that probably have the enthusiasm and they want to do well, but maybe they just don't have the same skills or the same experience. And you talked about that in a previous interview, and I was really interested to dig into that, because what I wanted to ask you is, what are the skills, not necessarily the technical knowledge or the technical skills, but what are maybe the soft skills that you think are most important for young people to learn that maybe they don't have, that maybe you only get through a career and through experience, if that makes sense?
I say maybe this won't answer that specifically, but one of the things I've really spotted and learned in doing this 5 times, working with students, because on each project is going to be a new body of students.
Sure. Yeah.
So it isn't like we sort of checked that off and now no, you have to start over.
And you probably see patterns or themes emerging where the different people maybe have the same challenges, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and this is sort of a bit inside of technical venue, but not necessarily. But one of the major themes that I do see pop up again and again is that when you get these people on board and they don't have a lot of experience working in teams or on bigger projects, the place where it sort of stuff falls through the cracks is always when someone needs to deliver something to me or to someone else, because they haven't been on the receiving end themselves.
Right.
So let's say that you ask me to send you, a preview of an animation or something, and then I send you a file that's a gigabyte in size.
Yeah.
Like, you probably don't need it to be, final quality, because it's just a preview.
Right.
You can compress it, and it sounds like a small thing, but it sort of cascades when you have 10, 20 people trying to work on the same project. And every time they send me something, or maybe I'll just be sent like a work file.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just need to sign off on this. I don't want to open it and then go into it and look at all the nitty gritty. Just show me a picture.
Yeah.
That's all I need. And then I can tell you that proportion is off. I want the leg to be bigger, whatever it is. And this is basically, and that's an advantage, I'd say, when you try to do a bit of everything yourself, because it forces you to, then this department is doing a little bit of that, and I gotta get in here, and then switch it into this other software, and then something breaks because I didn't account for whatever.
Yes.
So I would definitely say, and this is a bit on the technical side, I guess, but it's a really good idea to get just a minimal, at least a minimum of knowledge of different departments and what they do.
Yeah.
Because it'll just help smoothen out so much of the work, that when you send something off to someone, then they don't have to, either guess like, what is he asking, or how does that work, or what am I supposed to do with this? To just help it be a bit more smooth.
I guess there's a technical component to that, but also it sounds like you're saying that some part of it is about putting yourself in the shoes of the person you're working with, I suppose, and trying to understand what it is that they need. Do they need a massive file that's very high definition, or do they just need a screenshot? Why are they asking me? What do they need it for? So I think that's partly knowledge of how different teams work together, but also maybe just having that thought process of saying, like, if I was this person, what would I need from me, and why?
Exactly. And that's also, I mean, if you just started, working in, say, 3D, and you have like half a year or a year experience, then you don't know about sort of working in a team and stuff like that. So it's a big part of that is just experience. And I'd say another thing, actually, and that's an experience that I've gotten from actually working for other people and working for other directors.
Sure.
And here I've noticed a thing that I hope that I'm not doing, or at least something that I'm more focused on now in the future, and that is, if you're giving me directions, let's say I'm working on a visual effects shot, and you want something changed somewhere in the frame, then please be very specific. Because I've gotten emails that are like, this long, and then when I read through them, then I end up having to parse. Like, actually, you could have written like 2 sentences, super short, like this, I hate this, remove it.
Yeah.
And this part down here, could we do either that or that, A or B, instead of this whole sort of thought brain dump of I'm wondering, blah blah blah. That process is fine, but it doesn't help me.
Yes.
So that's just something I've noticed on the other end. It's really helpful if you can be specific. I mean, if you know what you want, then just tell me that. I don't need the whole sort of like, I would really love it. No. Just come on.
Short and to the point. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise you're basically wasting my time. I mean,
Yes.
I could spend that time doing better work for you instead of trying to parse what are you talking about.
Yeah. But if you're on a, whether you're working on a project with students in a school or a college, or whether you're on set, I suppose, at a commercial shoot, it's all about time management, right? I
Yeah,
believe, you have a limited number of days. Every day costs money, so you have to maximize the amount that you can get done in the days available. So any little thing where it's taken away from that is costing money and adds up, I imagine, I suppose. So that's
definitely. And then again, it's like, you want to prioritize. I mean, so some things you do want to have the extra time to sort, we got to figure this out, or maybe we're going to test some stuff or try something out. That's fine. But you can't do that with everything. I mean, if you have something that's very specific and you already know it, just execute it. I mean, you don't diddle daddle. Just go ahead and do it.
yeah. It's one thing you've said is that because of technology, the amount of technology and information that's available, I think you said the way you put it is that the playing field has become a lot more level now for people starting out.
Yeah.
But also, I suppose the shadow side of that is that it's not as easy for people to set themselves apart now. There's more people on the internet who can do things like VFX and stuff like that. So I'm curious if for people maybe starting out in this industry, what do you think they can do to set themselves apart, or to give themselves that advantage, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of advice, I say that when I started filmmaking, and the thing that inspired me to try my hand at filmmaking, that was sort of like, my heroes from the 90s, as I mentioned, Cameron, Fincher, and Scott, and that's fine to be inspired by that. But I also feel like now, both in my own work and in a lot of the work that I see from other people of my generation, is that we have had a tendency to try and just sort of, we want to do that, and then we try and copy that. I love Alien, I love Blade Runner, and then we're sort of trying to make a carbon copy of that. And in terms of learning and in terms of reverse engineering, what is it that makes it work? What is it that make this stuff, the shot look cool? Is it the fog, the depth of field, the lenses, whatever, anamorphic, whatever it is? That's fine. But if you want to stand out, then that is not the way to do it. I mean, and I'm totally guilty of this. I mean, I don't know how many of my films have, the sort of, blinking strobe light that I got from Alien and whatnot. And it's just, if you want to do, gritty, dirty science fiction today, you kind of have to try and do something else than Alien. Because otherwise you're just one of the people trying to copy it. And Ridley Scott didn't. I mean, he probably did copy something, but he didn't copy Alien.
But maybe with Blade Runner, he was looking back at like Metropolis and stuff like that had come even earlier, I guess, maybe. But he created something possibly very original, or from maybe, I don't know, from anime, or those influences, but he brought those together and made something arguably that people hadn't seen in that context before, I guess.
Exactly. And I read a book some time ago, something like Everything is a Copy or something like that. There's been, I'm sure there's lots of YouTube videos like that as well, and I do think it's true that nothing is 100% original, but that's kind of the thing. If you love Alien like I do, then if I make like a carbon copy, then I sort of failed. I mean, if the exercise is to copy it, then cool, but that's not gonna get me ahead. That's just gonna get me to Ridley Scott in the 70s. At best.
There is a challenge there, which is on the one hand to take what people have done, which is good and makes their work great, but also to not just emulate or to copy or to reproduce the same thing. Like you said, you need to be original, I suppose.
Exactly, because it's kind of like the thing I love the first Die Hard film as well. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
too.
great on so many points. But that film has been attempted to be copied many times, and it seems like both for the filmmakers and for the fans, the thing they seem to remember about Die Hard is Yippee and then the bloody tank top.
Yes.
And then when do you have? I won't mention any names, but there's been films where it's like, oh, we gotta have like the tank top and a guy running around with a gun, and it's like that's not it. That's not it. The film is first and foremost about a guy who's trying to win back his wife.
Yeah.
But
and it can't be. And also films come along that are original or are in the right place at the right time, and you can't just recreate those same conditions. It's like when every record producer at one point wanted to find the next Nirvana, right?
Yeah.
You know, there won't be a next Nirvana because they were a one-off. They were a thing that happened at one time in one specific place with one context, but everyone wants to reproduce that same circumstance, that same success. But I think it's the same with filmmaking, is that you can't just have another, because by its definition, then if you reproduce something, then it's not going to be original anymore, which was, I suppose,
exactly
part of the appeal.
Take another example, like Neil Blomkamp. He did the District 9, which was original.
Chappie. Others, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think most people would agree that probably District 9 was sort of like the magnus opus, or the one that sort of put him on the map, and probably the most interesting one in my mind anyway. But that was sort of like he sort of had that documentary view. That was new for a sci-fi film, and then it was in South Africa. I hadn't seen that before.
He was saying something about South Africa, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And then they had that sort of theme of aliens, like real aliens, but they're alien to us, and that sort of that whole apartheid thing. Yes. And then you really have a lot of stuff going there, and then it was super dirty, and it wasn't that sort of Independence Day aliens who sort of like, no, they're confused, and it's a whole other thing.
It didn't have a sheen to it, a Hollywood sheen. It looked very, like you say, gritty and very super real and flawed. Yeah, I understand what you mean. So that was, you're right. That's an example of something coming which is original in a sense that someone did something differently that hadn't really been done before. So they struck out on their own in that sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, to boil it down, I think my advice would be, and this isn't easy by any means.
No, definitely not.
But try to do that, and the trick is not to look at, then I gotta do District 9. No, that's not the thing. You gotta do you have an idea, or is this something that you care about that could be told in an interesting way? And then for sure, put on your anamorphic lenses and all that stuff that you want, that sort of interested you initially in terms of becoming a filmmaker, and then use all those tools. But it's not enough to sort of like look at something and then. But this is something I struggled with as well. I just sort of took me like 20 years to sort of, maybe I should do something else. And right now I don't know what that is. I still feel the drive to the need to create something. I mean, I love the world building aspect of it.
Yeah.
And probably still something in the science fiction genre. And I think, I mean, it's like, hasn't everything been told? But no, not really. And now with the whole AI revolution sort of coming in, I mean, the future we're looking at now looks a lot different than I imagine and what everybody else imagined even 10 years ago. I mean, it's not flying cars and stuff like that. And AI isn't this, Skynet Terminator thing. It's like this weird, now it's more like an avalanche of information that is generated by robots, and then maybe eventually consumed by robots, because you're not going to read an article that's 5 pages long written by an AI. Then you're going to have another AI to sort of contract it, and then it's going to tell you, and it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, in some ways we've almost reached technology that is more sophisticated than at some point people anticipated? Is it more sophisticated to have a car that can fly around, or is it more sophisticated to have a general artificial intelligence that can write screenplays, or compose music, or write poetry? But yeah, I understand what you're saying. At a certain point, it becomes so sophisticated that you have to ask, what are we doing this for? Or what's the actual purpose? Is it to create art? Is it to create something original? Or is it simply to, like we were talking about earlier, is it simply to reproduce and to emulate what already exists? And if so, what's the point of that? Henrik, we're coming up to, I suppose, the end of our time together. But since I'd love to ask one more question, if you don't mind. Since you mentioned before, you've realized some of these things over maybe the last 20 years. Is there anything else that you've come to learn during your time working in this field that maybe it wasn't clear when you started out, or that's maybe changed in the last couple of years? Is there anything that you'd do differently if you were starting out, or that you'd tell to someone who is starting out today?
If I were to sort of, give myself advice, if I could, like, 10, 20 years back.
Yeah, your past self.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I remember my past self enough to know that he didn't listen much to advice. So it's sort of moot in a way. But if I could sort of,
let's assume you're giving the advice to someone who is a better listener than you, who would maybe take the advice,
who was more amenable to sort of take it in. But I would say, I have, as I imagine a lot of people do, a tendency to sort of, I don't switch on the TV anymore. I switch on YouTube on the TV.
Yep.
And then that will sort of, their AI will sort of, maybe he watched that one, so maybe he liked to watch that one and that one as well. And then it tends to be focused on, technology or filmmaking or whatever. And then I find myself watching a lot of possibly, useful videos about, hey, this is good advice for writing. This is good advice for, writing a synopsis, or how do you break down a scene, what have you. And it's amazing that it's all available, all that stuff. But I feel that for me, at least, I have a tendency to just sort of, waddle down in that stream of, endless learning. And I have a ton of books behind me. I see you do as well.
Yes.
And it's nice to read up on theory and all that. And it's even nicer once you've actually done something than going back and reading that same book again, because it's going to be totally different.
Yes.
The next time you read it, because now you actually understand some of the stuff that they're talking about. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I think for me, try to spend a little less time learning about all the theory and stuff like that, and actually do something.
Yeah.
And if you can, and I remember all the people giving me this advice at the time, and I didn't listen. But if you can, try and do more that will force you to learn, faster than 4 years or 8 years to do that one project, because the amount of knowledge you get out of that. I mean, for me, if I spent, 4 of the 8 years, spare time doing visual effects for that short film, is that going to make me a better filmmaker, or is it just going to hone my visual effects skills?
Yes.
It's probably the latter. And that's fine for that venue of work. But if I want to do the filmmaking stuff, then, I mean, basically the advice is this: do what you want to do and pursue that. And listen a little bit less to people who tell you, this is the tricky part, because some advice is good, but you got to pursue what you want to pursue. And a piece of advice I've heard over and over again that I think I've always misunderstood is that old nugget of, write what you know. Like, what does that mean? So oh, well, I mean, I know a lot of, let's say, you used to work on an oil drill. So that whole milieu, and that's cool. Then you have some insights into, the ins and outs and how does that work, and then you can maybe write something interesting there as to sort of like a set piece, maybe, or drama or whatever. and that's fine. But like if you want to do something about the drug cartels and you don't work in law enforcement,
you're not gonna know that. Yeah, hopefully, So
yeah, exactly. And then if you think that's I like 2001, I like Alien, I like that sort of space travel and all that, then I'm not an astronaut. So what? I mean,
is that going to stop you from writing about space? Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, there is a point to write to your strengths. I mean, I probably shouldn't ever write a drama or a romantic comedy because that's not really. I mean, that's not the typical films that I would watch. So I'm probably more at home in action or thriller or something like that. But I think what I'm trying to say is just write what you know in terms of what interests you.
Yes.
I mean, if you're super engaged in this, then just go for it, and then all the other nitbit stuff you don't know, you can research it or get a partner who knows about it. I mean, this is what other people do.
Yeah.
You don't have to know everything, but you have to have a drive.
Yes.
Because it takes a lot of time to do anything. It doesn't need to take 8 years or 4 years, hopefully.
Yeah, to do a 4-minute video.
Exactly. Yeah. Or it shouldn't, I'd say.
Yeah.
But pursue your goals and then be very adamant about. I mean, this is what you want to do, and don't try to cater to. Now I don't know what have you. This is unpopular to say, but let's say that there's some identity politics or whatever that's popular or in vogue or something. It fills everything, and then it's like, then I'll try to sort of cater to that, and bend backwards to make my project fit into that. But that's just gonna break it. I mean, if this interests you, or if you're a gay person or whatever,
sure.
Great, write about that if it interests you.
Be authentic.
Exactly.
To your beliefs. Yeah.
Exactly. I'd say don't try and sort of emulate something you're not just to attempt to be successful.
Yeah.
Or to try to get your foot in the door, because I don't think it works really. It's kind of like not the same, but kind of like, I love Alien, so I'm gonna copy Alien. It's like you got to bring something to it.
Yes. Your own voice or your own sensibility.
Exactly, because that's what's gonna make it different. And in terms of every story's been told, everything's been written. Sure, sort of, but it hasn't been written or done by you.
Yes and no. Yeah, it's kind of true, but also not true as well. The way, depending on how you look at it. Yeah. Just before we wrap things up, is there any other projects or anything else that you'd like to promote just while you have the chance, or anything else that you'd like to add before we finish?
No, I'm not really sure. I mean, as I sort of briefly venture into, I right now with the whole family situation, I'm mainly just trying to work money jobs, and then I have a little. I wouldn't call it a side project, but I have sort of like a boutique where I create tools for people like myself, like visual effects artists and animators.
Oh, right. Okay.
That makes it a bit easier for them to do greater work in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
So I've made some tools, for instance, in 3D animation. If you want to have an effect called caustics, which is light that's scattered through water, like into a swimming pool.
Yeah.
You can calculate that in the computer in all the modern 3D render engines.
Oh, cool.
But it takes a lot of time. So what I've done is made like a tapestry where I've already made the calculations. So you just have like a sequence of images or animation of the lighting effect of the caustics.
Okay.
And then it's made in a way so it's tileable. So sort of like the wallpaper behind you. You can just sort of like copy it next to each other, and it's gonna look like one seamless big pattern.
Oh, wow. So if
And
people are interested in, sort of licensing that from you or purchasing that from you, should they contact you via your website or socials and have a chat with you about that?
well, I have a dedicated website for that. It's called figment.dk. This is basically my company website. So that this is where I provide visual effects services, and then I have my shop in there as well.
Great. And we can link to that in the notes from this video as well, if you'd like us to.
Yeah, definitely. This is very much aimed at a 3D animation artist. So it's very niche. It's not really like filmmaker centric per se.
Sure. Yeah. Again, thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed it. So
yeah, me too.
Thank you, and have a great day. Take care.
You too. Cheers,
Thanks,
man.
Henrik. Bye for now.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed watching today's interview. This video is part of the Filmmaker interview series from Pzaz. At Pzaz, we're building a production ecosystem that helps you to get things done. To try it for free, visit pzaz.io today. Thanks for watching.